All right, so welcome to Adult Education. I am Jessica Ross, a mental health and sexual health therapist in Michigan. And today I have with me David. David, we met at University of Michigan, I
Yep.
think two years ago,
Yep.
during the sexual health certificate program. And so I'm going to allow David to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about who he is.
Thank you so much, Jessica. Yes, I'm David Johnson, and I'm in business and also in ministry. And I believe that the ministry piece requires me to have knowledge about sex education. And so going into the Michigan program where we met, I definitely was going with that in mind. And I'm glad that it's brought me to this place. I'm founder of Kingdom Promises Ministries, where I, develop lesson plans, and I work with young people about lessons for coming of age. And it's definitely a passion of mine that I have to work with young people. I believe that the next generation is a generation to really support and to really learn from. And anything that I
Yeah.
can do to help instill great values and support in the younger generation, I want to do that.
And I appreciate that because that is definitely the generation to target. I have kids and their questions and what they go through and what they face is so much different than when we were kids. And so I
Mhm.
definitely appreciate that perspective and what you're doing. So as promised, I'm going to try and do 10 questions in a
Okay.
few short minutes. And so we're going to break right in. And so the first question is, why sex and religion? Why put those two things together? A lot of people would say no, those two things do not go together.
Because if you don't have a conversation about sex and religion, there's going to be a conflict, whether it's stated or not stated. There is a school of thought that the Bible or religious text don't delve enough into sex, so there's a lot of confusion, especially when it relates to how women have been treated, or the agency that men and women have with their own bodies.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people want to try to discount religious texts, the Bible, because of what they say it does not say. And so I believe being in ministry is so important to have a conversation, an open, candid conversation about what questions you have, because the thing about being a Christian doesn't mean that negates your sexuality, or that negates the sexual feelings that you have. It just helps to guide the thought about how you explore and how you show your sexuality, and how you use your sexual appetite on a just a more informed basis. And so it's very important to really see what the culture was in the Bible and biblical times, so that can help you understand why there were some things that were said, and why there were a lot of things that might not have been said. So it's so important to merge the two, so that you can have that open and honest conversation. Because I think, we were talking about the younger generation. Another thing about the younger generation is they're not afraid to ask questions, and we have to be ready to have an answer. And we can't say, well, this is just the way that it's always been. We have to be able to um, really have an open and candid conversation. And it starts with us being informed. So that's why it's important for me to have those two intersect.
I can very much so appreciate that answer. Just kind of thinking about me growing up in the church and what that was like. So definitely can appreciate that answer. So you kind of went into a little bit of my next question,
Okay.
in terms of what do the kids ask? What is it that they're wanting to know? Where do you find yourself counseling them on the most?
Well, it's going to be different for every situation. And I really try to meet people where they are with the conversations that they have. I definitely don't want to go into a conversation or a meeting with someone and think that their needs or their concerns are the same as someone else that I might have spoken with. Because I talked about how coming of age is important for me to talk about. So even before we get to the conversation about sex with young people, they want to know about self-esteem, and they want to know about comparison, and they want to know about social media. And those topics are at the forefront of their minds, in addition to the conversations about sex and
Mm-hmm.
sexuality. uh, I think that in conversations, it's so important to be careful uh, not to make someone feel bad
Yeah.
if they might have a proclivity to sexual
Mm,
activity, even if they're Christians. Because I've spoken with people that definitely are sexually active, but are very involved in the church, and
mm,
I don't want to make it seem like I'm coming down on them, or that is something that prevents them from having a conversation with me. You know, I really try to
mm.
meet the person where they are and understand their history, and just let the conversation flow based off of what they want to talk about without any judgment.
That's probably really helpful for the population that you're serving, because I think that's one of the things I hear the most is I can't because of what I'm doing. I can't be in the church because of what I
Yeah,
do outside of the church. And so
yeah.
having someone to talk through those things with, I think is extremely important. So how do you suggest navigating individuals who identify as Christian? They show up at church, they're at Bible
Yeah,
study, they're in the choir,
yeah.
but they want to explore sexually. They not just date, but they're dating, and they think they're ready for the next step, but maybe not ready for marriage. And so, how do you talk about that?
Well, I definitely want to get to the why of why someone might feel ready for taking the next
Mhm.
step, because even in that comparison piece or the self-esteem piece, I would want to make sure that the person is not wanting to be sexually active for reasons of thinking that will boost their confidence,
Mm-hmm.
or reasons that they might lose their partner because they are not willing to be sexually active. And so I
That's
definitely
right.
want to get to the why behind it. Um, and I want to make sure that the person is being safe. I just really believe, and I don't want to make it seem like there are people that are not, celibate or abstinent, and I want to walk that line with
Mm-hmm.
whomever presents that as well. But for the people who present being sexually active, I want to make sure that they are being safe. And safety comes from knowledge, but then safety also comes from making sure that they are using barrier methods, or they find the right the right the right tools that they can employ when they are making that next step. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really going to come down to the person. It goes back to the no judgment, wanting to meet the person where they are, and not be naive to think that just because somebody might have a certain religious background that they're not sexually active. And you being the consummate professional that you are, you probably will get to this, but there's also trauma that people have faced in their childhood when they're
Mm-hmm.
younger, and so that can expose them at an earlier age than
Mm-hmm.
what might
Yeah.
previously be conceived, that might open them up to sexual activity.
Mm-hmm.
And by no wrongdoing of that person's own when they are younger, it just might be a
Yeah.
coping mechanism that they employ to be sexually active. And so that could be before they found faith. So now, they're at this crossroads. Okay, they found faith, but they've had this proclivity for sexual activity because of different experiences that they might have had in their youth. And so how do we have a conversation about what that means for their
Yeah.
religion, and what that means for their psyche? And
Mm-hmm.
so it's important to also have that conversation that it's really not that people just wake up, okay, I'm just going to have sex.
Yeah.
Uh, there's also a history that comes with that, and people in the church are no different from that either.
Hmm. And I appreciate that you brought up trauma. That's on my list. I'm going to jump into
See?
that question,
Yeah.
right? We're here. So part of what I see as a practitioner is that a lot of times when people, sometimes they go through a trauma, like you said, some people sexually act out, some people never have sex again. They have very
Yep.
different responses to that. And so what tends to happen is that, um, some people find religion after, some people have been religious
Yeah.
all the way through. I know some people have had very abusive experience by their
Mhm.
parents with sort of religious aspects. So by the time they get to me, what I find is that some people are worried about being punished or feeling like their rape was punishment for their behavior, and that God
Wow.
is, God is telling them that they're deserving of this, and so that
Right.
their trauma, right, is this huge demonic force. And I
Right.
won't even say demonic force, but some people think it's God, that God is doing this, and so the trauma
Wow.
response, the PTSD response,
Yeah.
can be very hard to separate and say, no, this is mental health,
Yeah.
right? And so this
Yeah.
is post-traumatic stress. And that doesn't shape or take away from your faith, right? But here's how your brain works, here's how your faith works.
Wow.
And I end up telling people a lot of times that they're siblings that don't always get along. Faith and mental health can be siblings
Wow.
that don't get along, but they have to. So
Yeah.
what is your perspective on trauma? A little bit more about trauma and faith and that punishment aspect that a lot of times people come up
Yeah.
with.
So Jessica, I want to offer something that we talked about at Michigan that really exposed me to this concept about sexual non-concordance. And so
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the times with trauma and with early sexual activity or even unwanted sexual activity, there's something called sexual non-concordance, where you might be having quote unquote pleasurable
Mm-hmm.
experiences, or you might be showing that there is a form of pleasure just based off of what physiologically is going on with your body, but that is still not indicative of how you want to experience sex, or that is not an indication that you are welcoming what's going on with you.
Mm-hmm.
So I really think that point is freeing, or can be freeing when we are able to communicate that to people, that, yeah, you might be having this response, but just because you're having this response, that is only showing that physiologically and biologically,
Mm-hmm.
your organs are doing what they're naturally supposed to do. But that does not mean that you want the experience that is going on. And so I think it's important to have that conversation intertwined in the answer, because there are a lot of experience that people can have, and that's toxic religion to think that a God of love would be punishing
Mm-hmm.
someone by sexual trauma such as rape, and for individuals that might not have religious background, it's important to not perpetuate that thought that punishment for different experiences or actions in your life comes from God, because a God of love would not do that. And so that kind of goes back to why I wanted to get into this work, because I want to make sure I can have that conversation and let someone know that God wouldn't punish you that way, or at all. And so
Mm-hmm.
that to put that in to the conversation about punishment coming from God, that can turn people off to religion. But it's so
Yeah.
important to let people know that, you can have a sexual experience and your body react, but that doesn't mean that you are welcoming what's going on with you.
That's an extremely good point. That is definitely a conversation we have often, that your body is going to be responsive because that's what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
Does not mean, right, that it's a desire or something that you want. But then the other part, right, God is a God of love, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the emphasis that I try to share with people as well, right, to push that in.
Mhm.
So I'm very glad that you said that. We're going to stay in the mental health lane a little bit.
Okay.
Um, Sometimes people struggle between going to their religious leaders or counselors within the church and then going to see a mental health professional outside of the church. How would you suggest people navigate that?
That's a really touchy question, because uh, individuals really get um, closely entwined with their religious leader, from a what should I do next standpoint. They want to make sure that their religious leader approves of what they do,
Mm,
and so I wouldn't even really put that on the person. That means that there needs to be a conversation with the religious leaders to know their limit about what they can talk about and what they cannot talk about just based off of their qualifications and experiences,
Mm,
because there can be more harm done than good when a religious leader might talk to a person about mental health or about something that is out of the scope of their background and their professional experiences and knowledge.
mm,
And so I'm trying to be delicate with the words that I use, but um, people really are attached to the religious leader in some type of way, and that's a conversation that needs to be unpacked,
mm,
because the part of shepherding, I do believe that there should be some level of attachment, but I also want to make sure that the religious leader takes it upon themselves to know their limit and what they can and cannot talk about, and being comfortable to refer to professionals, professionals like yourself that are willing and able and qualified to have the necessary conversation without bias and without judgment.
mhm. That last part, right? Without bias and without judgment. And I think
Mhm.
that's the part sometimes that people struggle with, and sometimes not intentionally,
Right,
right? Simply because you have a way of life, a way of belief, a way you have survived. And sometimes we put that on other people. But
right, right.
from the mental health perspective, I'm going to say the same thing, because sometimes people come to me and I have to remind them, here's
Yeah,
my scope, right? I
yeah,
can
yeah,
talk about this because of my own personal religious background, but I
yeah.
cannot give you spiritual counsel because that
Right,
is not where I am in
right.
my gift. And so I
Yeah,
think that goes both ways, to know your
yeah,
limits, to know your competency, and then be able to be honest about that. So
yeah,
and I share that. Yeah, we can talk scripture. I know a little, but I'm not going to
yeah.
be able to give you something that you maybe, have to go somewhere else and get. So I
Can
think
I
that
just
can go both
piggyback off of that? I
ways.
really like what you said. It goes both ways. And so someone is going to the religious leader about a mental health concern. We have to know our limits. But then even going to the counselor, when it comes up to questions of faith, the counselor has to know their limit as well. I really like that point that you made.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I do. I definitely think it goes both ways. Moving a little bit forward, talk to me a little bit about dating in God. I'm
It
sure
can be
this is a
tricky.
question that comes up, right? So talk to me a little bit about what is that like? How do we navigate that?
Yeah. It can be tricky. Um, but I really believe that what can help it not be so confusing is to just be honest about your experiences, your past, your wants, your needs, your
Hmm.
limits, and your boundaries.
Hmm.
And it kind of goes back to everything that we've talked about so far. People come into faith at different stages of their lives. Some people have been saved all their life, quote unquote, but then some people, find faith and they're running with it, and they love God, but that doesn't negate the different experiences that they've had in the past. And so, when it comes to dating, yes, you can both be people of faith, Christians, however you identify with your faith, but that doesn't mean you have similar experiences with dating, relationships, sex, and you really have to be honest. Just to be candid, I've had to be honest in the past about uh, you know my boundaries and my limits. Someone that you know uh, I really liked, and still am fond of, but I had to be honest about where I was, and so that it couldn't be unreasonable expectations with me and her, and based off of that honesty, we can decide where we want to go from there. But it's going to be better to be honest about where you are, as you navigate and as you date. And let me just also say this point about dating with being a Christian or having a religious
Hmm.
affiliation. It can kind of go back to that being attached to your religious leader. You have to make sure that your religious leader really has a heart for who you are and the experiences that you had, and that person doesn't have a one size fits all as relates to going forward with relationships, because people have so many varied experiences.
Mm.
And so, I say that because it is important to subscribe to what your religious institution body, your religious leader prescribes as it relates to when you should date, how you should date. But you also have to be able to let the conversation continue with what you've experienced and what you're comfortable with, and being able to be vocal yourself about your boundaries and your limits too.
Thank you for that. Thank you for adding that point,
Yeah.
because I think that's a place a lot of people struggle, trying to be faithful, and trying to also, find their next step in this world in terms of relationship and life and family.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to jump into a few more questions here. We got a couple more. So talk to me, what exactly is celibacy? The second question, so that I'm going to ask them both at the same time, what is abstinence, and how do they differ?
Okay. So celibacy is when you really believe that there's a call from God on your life not to enter into relationships and even marriage. Is really something that God calls a person to, and that person is refraining from a sexual activity, and really believes that even their life should go forward even without marriage. And it's not always common for people to really believe that that's what God's called them to. That's kind of the technical piece of what it is. I believe that people couple celibacy with abstinence,
Mm-hmm.
and with abstinence being just refraining from sex. You're
Mm-hmm.
abstaining, and abstinence it can be a form of barrier method, because you're not having sex at all. So there's no chance of getting pregnant or chance of getting an STI.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not always talked about. But that is one method that can be employed. But celibacy is really a religious uh, experience with God, and with what it means to um, live your life for God, if God's called you to that. And I would give an example of eunuchs in the Bible. Those
Mm-hmm.
were men in the Bible that dedicated their lives to God's service, and did not go forward in sexual activity or marriage. Just to give that example. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that we might be familiar with the concept of a nun just
Mm-hmm.
from pop culture, but that is someone in a religious organization that believes that they should remain unmarried as a woman, and a priest is someone as a man that believes he should remain unmarried to do God's work. But I also want to just put a caveat in there that I really believe that God can call somebody to celibacy, but can also call someone to enter into marriage, even if they have been celibate in the past. I do honestly believe that, because God can be using that person as an example for a dispensation of time,
Mm-hmm.
and to go forward with a certain um, a certain mandate to live their life in a certain way to show other people that it's possible. But I do believe that God can also allow that person to enter into relationships and enter into marriage and enter into sexual activity when it's the right time.
Mm-hmm. That was helpful. You taught me something. Right. Okay. So my next question, I'm going to ask you one question and a bonus question, and then we'll be done. So the 10th question here is, we're living in a state of pandemic. We are living in a state of another uprising of social justice, right? This isn't new.
Yeah.
We're living in a state of mental health that's being pushed to its brinks for a lot of people, because
Yeah.
they're experiencing all of this in a very sediment way, because we're sitting in place. And
Yeah.
so you, as a Black man who understands sexual health, and who
Mm.
understands faith and religion and is
Yeah.
in ministry, and also understands mental health, What is
Yeah.
that like for you to be a Black man in this world? And our world isn't all Black, right? We intersect with
Yeah.
all sorts of people. So
Yeah.
what has this been like?
Overwhelming, honestly. You want to be strong as a Black man for those around you. And it just even being a little bit more general in the Black community, there are a lot of people that can depend on one person in their family.
Mm,
That's kind of how our community is. And so, especially being a Black man, there are a lot of people that depend on you. And so it can be overwhelming. You want to be strong for your family, those that are caregivers, to children and even parents. But it's so important to be honest. It goes back to that honesty, when you're
mhm,
asking about the relationship piece, but it's important to be honest about, when people ask how you are, it, let's go a little bit deeper than I'm fine.
mm, mhm,
Let's go a little bit deeper than nothing's going on,
mhm,
but let's
mhm,
let's 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 actually be honest about where we are. Say, I am a little overwhelmed actually, that I've
mhm,
had the responsibility of caring for this, or having to make sure that the finances come up to that.
mhm,
But I know that talking about it will help me get through it. We have to be honest. You were asking about Black men, so we as Black men have to be honest about where we are, and it's not easy,
yeah.
Jessica. I mean, that's not easy. Just how the Black family is, and what we've had to deal with,
Mhm,
for centuries, and the Black man, there are so many, um, uh, there's so much on us.
yeah, yeah.
And so when I answer that saying it's overwhelming, but I do strive to mirror that and model that by being honest in my conversations when people ask how I am, because
Mhm,
it's not easy, but I
yeah.
believe that God's given me what I need to make it, for to make sure I'll be all right, but also the people that depend on me to be all right too.
Mm. Great point. I was just saying that the other day, that we as Black women have the I am okay syndrome, that we are
Yeah,
always okay. And the truth is, no, we're
yeah,
not okay. This is
yeah,
hard.
yeah,
I do this for a living, but it's still hard. It still affects
yeah,
me, it still impacts me. And so, yeah, I appreciate that honesty there to say,
yeah.
say when you're not okay, say it's overwhelming, be very honest and truthful in your feelings and connect.
But can I ask you a little bit more about that?
Go
Have
ahead.
you have you been seeing that Black men and Black women, when they talk to you, have they been a little bit more open about what's going on, or do we still have those walls up?
So I think right now people are very open, they're very raw,
Okay.
and people are being very honest about those feelings. I think in the beginning people try to be okay, but
Yeah.
when you are sitting still and you're forced to see it on television, you have
Yeah.
no choice but to be honest. And I think that's what shifted, that allowed people to be more honest about what they were experiencing.
Okay.
If even myself, if I tell you the truth, I turned on. I like to watch Wheel of Fortune, and I
Okay.
turned on the television a little early, a few minutes
Mhm.
early, and the news was still on.
Right.
And in,
Yep.
in, in 10 minutes, there was George Floyd's death. Then there
Yep.
was the death of the young man at Wendy's. And
Yeah.
then right after that was
Richard
the
Brooks.
pandemic conversation. Yeah, Rashard Brooks. And then right after that, they went to um, another conversation about, oh, they
Don't
went
leave it
to the
alone.
protest. Yeah, and it was like in
Yeah.
six, I had to turn it off because it took
Yes.
me out
I
of
gotta
my
turn it off
space.
too. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So it was too much. I said I can't. And
Yeah.
and I see it, I get it, I live it. I have 3 children, 2 Black
Yeah.
sons,
Yeah.
and so it's a very different space. And so
Yeah.
watching these things and talking about them, and of course everybody is having that experience in therapy, and so I'm
Yeah.
talking about it all day. And then I'm
Yeah.
having to remind my children, that talk we have to give. If
Yeah.
we're pulled over, this is what you do,
Wow.
and this and
Yep.
every, so you're going through those very real experiences where, you're
Yeah.
answering to everybody, like you kind of said. And so, no, I think people had no choice this time but to
Okay.
be honest, because it was too much, too fast, and you couldn't do anything but stare at the TV. You turn
Right.
on, whatever you turn on, it says Black Lives Matter. It says we care. I got 10 emails in
Yeah.
one day from 10
Right.
different companies. And so you couldn't miss it. And it
Yeah.
did. It stretches you to your limit. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
people are being more honest now than they've ever been.
Right. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. All right. So our bonus questions here.
Okay,
Um,
cool. Bonus question.
Bonus questions. Yeah. So the two that really come to mind. So the first is I have like a lot of conversation about infertility. People,
Mm,
I've been praying, and maybe I just am not supposed to bear children. Maybe that's not in God's
wow.
plan for me.
Wow.
So talk to me about what do you say when that comes up? Because again, I stay in my lane, and I can only navigate that so much, right? And I know
Right.
there may be no absolute answer to that, but how do you navigate that?
Well, I'm going to answer, but let me just say this. That has not come up in my conversation, so I don't want to
Mm,
make it seem like I'm coming from experience. And infertility, I imagine that is a very, very sensitive
mhm,
topic, a very, very sensitive subject.
mhm,
I have been, in the midst of individuals that have not been able to conceive on their own, and so they've done the IVF,
mhm,
in vitro, and it worked for them. But it worked for them after many tries. And so, if I were presented with a question about infertility, um, and infertility can be on the part of the man or the woman,
right.
so that would be the first piece of it. Well, who has been diagnosed as being infertile? and
Mhm,
and and then I would want to know, well, have you gone to a specialist that can speak with you more about your options?
mhm,
And I believe that the conversation will unfold from there. But that would definitely be a conversation that I would have to get as much information as I could to suggest the next best steps. But
mhm.
it wouldn't come from a place of experience on my end.
Okay. Thank you for your honesty there. All right. Our next bonus question is praying enough? Well, that's a big one. Is praying enough? Do we have to do other things?
Well, I mean, the Bible says faith without works is dead. So um, uh, praying it is a piece that has to be there. So
Mhm,
so we can't just do the other stuff without praying, but we can't just stop at the prayer either. We have to pray, but we have to act. And I was talking with some people about this a little while back, saying that I know you didn't ask about the church, but to tie this
come
in
on.
with it,
Mhm,
the church can't be reactive to a lot of things that are going on in the world, because it goes back to the generation. They're going to ask questions, and they're going to act, and they're going to make their own decisions. The church can't be reactive to what's going on. And so we have to pray, and we have to ask God how we should move in this time, because there are
mm,
people that really need to see the church, people of faith, right in the movement with them. Because if they don't see them, that doesn't mean that they won't see other people. We
mhm,
have to be visible, because the people are going to go regardless. And so
mhm,
we have to pray, because it's a requirement for us to pray. It's important for us to pray so we can stay connected to God. But we also have to use that prayer to give us the power to act. We have to put some actions behind our faith. We have to make sure we do work towards something, but it starts with prayer. I'll say it starts and
mm.
it ends with prayer, but in the middle there has to be action.
Okay. All right. That's how. Okay. That's helpful. Okay.
God
Our
gives the
last.
increase.
Okay. All right. So last bonus question, and then we will be done here.
Okay.
When, well, it's I'll ask it in a particular kind of way. So the question is really, is sex healthy? With an
Okay.
asterisk that will say, when is sex healthy?
Okay. um Sex is healthy when the people that are going to be engaged in sex have come to a conversation or an understanding about what they want. They've communicated their needs, their desires, their histories, and they really have a connection with each other. Because another piece from Michigan, we know that sex starts in the brain too, and
Mm-hmm.
so we have to make sure that we have that connection, so that the right you know hormones can be released, and we can make sure that the pleasure center is satisfied, because we have a connection with the person that we're ready to enter into sexual intercourse with. And so when those two people have made up in their minds that they're ready, um, it becomes healthy in my opinion. And I don't want to put I don't want to put more weight on that, because it's not a decision I can make for someone else.
Mm,
You
okay.
know, but it's important that they're ready and they've had the conversations with each other, and they can really let their brain do the work,
Hmm.
with them being connected.
And it goes back to that earlier answer to dating and exploration and being honest and making
Yeah,
sure, right, we understand our whys and our
yeah,
history. So I appreciate that. All right,
yeah,
David, why don't you tell the world, how do they follow you? How do they contact you? Remind us the name of your organization.
yeah. Yeah, so founder of Kingdom Promises Ministries. You know, it's a labor of love, and I seek to improve the content that I create each day for Kingdom Promises Ministries. It's kingdompromisesministries.com. And look to see what I have on my website right now, but I
Hmm.
do look for there to be more content very soon. Also, you can follow me on all social media platforms at David E. Johnson Jr. That's at David E. Johnson Jr. I have a fan page on Facebook, and through that fan page, you can contact me on WhatsApp. And you know, let me just add this in there. I really do keep that open, and it's something that I've been thinking about. You know, as I go forward with the different things that I do, should
Hmm.
I, you know, keep that line of communication open? And it's just something that I've always wanted to be. I've always wanted to be accessible, because I mean, I really believe that it's important, and I feel like I have the capacity for that.
Mm,
And I don't have it all figured out, but I want to make sure that I'm a resource so people know that I'm real and I'm touchable. So
mhm,
I always have the WhatsApp open, and I am making it a point to have conversations with
mm,
people that reach out honestly. You
mhm.
know, I really want to make sure that I make myself available. And you know, if you want to contact somebody, you're gonna contact somebody. So
Absolutely. You will figure it
I'm
out,
open
right?
to it. Yeah.
Well, David, I appreciate you. Please go check out Kingdom Promise Ministries. Follow David on social media. And again, I just really thank you for this very honest conversation and for you contributing to this.
Thank
And
you for
we are
having
going to
me.
close. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Thank you.